Welcome to the What's the BPM podcast. You join with me, Steve Woolley, my co-host, Jared, aka JFrantik Herring.
What's happening, brother?
Yeah, good to have you here, mate. And the special guest today is Paul Maddox, coming to us live from the UK. Welcome,
Evening,
Paul.
stroke morning, guys. How you doing?
Good, brother.
Yeah,
good to have you on the call, mate.
Yeah, wicked. Good to be here.
Yeah, awesome.
Mate, during the week, we're just saying off air, I always refer to Jared as Frantic. I just always add. That used to be his DJ name. But during the week, me and Frantic were talking, and we were like, you're so young. We were like saying, when you started making music, you must have been like so young. Like, so I guess to start the podcast, let's wind it back. You're from Sheffield. Like, how did you get into producing and dance music?
Yeah, so from a little town called Chesterfield near Sheffield, basically. Yeah, like slap bang in the middle of England, pretty much. Like draw across through England, and Chesterfield's pretty much right in the middle. And yeah, to be honest, I've always been into music, but I was never, as a kid, as a young kid, I was never a musical child. Do you know what I mean? I didn't play any instruments. Like neither of my parents were, musicians or anything like that. But they were both into music. Is that there was definitely always music about, and it was an important thing. But I wasn't like a keyboard wizard or a drummer or a guitar player or anything like that. But yeah, always loved music, and I was more of a nerd, to be honest. I was more into gaming and pissing about on computers. So back this is sort of in the early to mid 90s when like computers weren't just every part of everyday life. It was a bit of a nerdy thing to be a like computer kid. Yeah. And those two things kind of collided, really. So I just started messing around. This is probably when I was about maybe 14 or 15, messing around with, things like Dance EJ. I don't know if you remember that. It was kind of like a PlayStation and PC thing. And it was just sort of drag and drop. It had a load of pre-made loops in it. And you could, put this drum beat with this, bass line or whatever. Really sort of primitive prefab stuff. But I just found it really fun. I'd lose hours to that. And then, as sort of time progressed, got a thing called, it was called Acid. It was made by Sonic Foundry, who made Soundforge, and then Sony bought it later. But that was kind of like an audio only thing where you could sample things and time stretch them, so you could take a loop from something and loop from something else and put them in time with one another relatively easily, which was, obviously that's literally everything, every bit of free iPhone software can do that now. But, at the time that was kind of revolutionary. So yeah, just started messing around with that, doing little, kind of mashups, basically, sticking a vocal from one thing over another track or, sort of like mashing two tracks together. So it was that kind of like, sort of bootleggy mashup type stuff that I was doing to start with. And around about that time, I was sort of going out, around my local town, just normal, teenage nights out drinking and that. And started giving these little CDs that I'd done to the DJs that were playing in the bars and stuff around my town. And a couple of people started playing a few things. I can't even remember what it was now, but some like really cheesy, mashup stuff. It wasn't really dance music. It was just sort of that kind of thing. And then there was a regional radio station called Galaxy that had this feature called Fly or Die, where sort of up and coming producers sent stuff in. And every day they'd play two. They'd play the one that won the day before plus a new one. And if you won, people phoned in. If you won, you got played the next day, so on. And I did this little sort of like quite basic. It wasn't, I listened back to it now and it wasn't really very good. Bootleg remix, I guess, of Belinda Carlisle, Heaven is a Place on Earth. And that got played on the radio every day for like a week or something. Yeah, a few days. Yeah, and that was the point where I was like, oh, maybe this is something that I should actually pursue, rather than it literally being just a hobby, something that I was messing around with. That was the point where I started to actually think. I still didn't think of it as a career, but I thought, maybe it's worth spending a bit more time and getting a bit better at this,
Sorry, what time would this have been? Like what year?
Right, so I would have been about 16 and I was born in 83. So what would that be like? To early 2000s, I guess? Or about 2000 probably, like 98, 99, something like that. Yeah.
So you're a year older than me then, Paul, because I'm 84. Yep. So you're a year older than me.
Yeah. Sound. So yeah, we've got the same reference points in terms of growing up and stuff then. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And of course, Steve's only, what are you, Steve? You're a couple of years older than both 46. Of us, but not by many. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's all the same once you get past 40, isn't it?
That's what I was just gonna say. It's all downhill
What's
after
a year?
40. You don't even bother counting.
Yeah. Yeah. When someone actually says, how old are you? Like, well, 45, 46.
40 odd. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just say old.
Yeah. That's a cool story, man. I've always wondered, like, because I've obviously I read up a lot about, your journey as a producer and an artist, a musician, really. And I always was like, how did he get started in this game? Because a lot of producers start because of certain reasons, or they just fall into it, or they start DJing and they sort of want to take that further, that next step of production. So it's really good to hear that story, man. And I suppose when you're talking about, the days of which you're 16 and getting into that, and you mentioned there was a turning point when that Belinda Carlisle track was being played live. What steps did you take then as an artist? What were you sort of thinking at the time, and what were you up against? Did you invest in buying some kit, or what happened from there?
So yeah, it was kind of a bit of a, there wasn't really much of a plan at that point. I still, like I said, it was more a hobby that I thought, oh, maybe I'm all right at this, rather than this is my thing. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think I still at that point intended to, go to uni and have a proper job. But yeah, that but yeah, I did. I invested a bit of gear. I had a sort of weekend job at the time, because I was still at school at that point, and so I had a weekend job working in butchers, and put my money from that into buying a few bits of equipment. So I bought already had a computer, obviously, and then I also bought a Novation Nova, which was like it was a small version of the Supernova, basically, and a little mixer, a little Soundcraft like 10 channel, 12 channel mixer, and I think that was it. There might have been something else as well, but they were the main things anyway. So then I was, still using the computer for most of it, and then just getting some synth sounds off the Nova, because back then, PCs weren't super powerful. You couldn't just run loads of VSTs for everything. If you wanted good synth sounds, you needed a hardware synth of some kind to do it. So, and then I learnt those bits inside out. I had those few bits of equipment, learnt those really, really well. And it was around about the time I was actually starting to go out to proper clubs, rather than just your sort of drinking holes around your local town. You're actually starting to go out and watch DJs and get into the dance music scene a bit more. So then those two things kind of evolved in parallel, as I was getting exposed to, trance and hard house primarily. It was like going out to places like Gatecrasher and Progress in Derby, Insomniacs, those kind of places. That was shaping my musical passion at the time. And therefore that was then shaping the music that I was making at the time as well. So that kind of the two things kind of happened. At the point it was still a hobby. I was probably spending too much time sort of going out and going to parties and after parties than I should have been out.
having a good time.
But the partying was the focus rather than the music at that point. The music was still just a hobby, really, that a hobby that I really enjoyed. But it was definitely, I was still planning on going and being a material scientist is what I was planning on being, but unfortunately I spent far too much time staying up late and watching Glasby playing, and not enough time studying, so that never happened. But it's all good.
So what were you like, where was your inspiration coming from at the time when you're going back? Were you sort of, or how, actually question more of an inspiration, how did you draw the inspiration? What was sort of, was it the clubs, or was it something else? Was it traditional music? What was really gathering that sort of sound that everyone knows of today?
Probably a combination of those things, really. So slightly before I was going to the clubs, it was compilation CDs, which were absolutely, they were a huge thing at that point in time. So like the Euphoria compilations and the trade CDs. I probably got introduced to those a little bit later, actually. But it would have been things like the Euphorias, like the Hard House Euphoria that Lisa Lashes did. And I'm trying to think, there was a few others around them. I think Frantic did a CD comp that was like Andy Farley and Real, possibly.
Yeah, that's right.
Was that the second one? Yeah. But those kind of things. So that it was that first. Then obviously, I started seeing the DJs that were mixing those comps, actually playing out live. And it was a combination of those with the musical taste that I already had from before, which was, more, from your parents' music collection, stuff that you liked from the radio, so bits of 80s stuff and, all that kind of thing. Bit of Belinda Carlisle. So it was a bit of a melting pot, really. And that music that I was making around that time. So this is kind of pre-Tidy. It was like I listen back to it. Obviously, the production's terrible and things like that. But actually, there's something really nice about the naivety of music when you haven't been doing it for very long. You're just like, I'll do whatever. Because you don't know what the rules are to break them at that point.
Yeah.
So even though that technically it wasn't very accomplished, it's really it's quite fun to listen back and think, God, actually, there was some things in there that I wouldn't do now because you get too, what the right way is too much, and you don't have that sort of beautiful naivety that you have as a teenager.
Well, I think, as an artist, if you're a producer or a musician or a martial artist or whatever, you sort of, when you're first starting out, you're really just experimenting, aren't you, I guess?
Exactly. Yeah.
And that experimentation or experimental aspect is exploratory, and you're just coming up with stuff and ideas. You don't really know what you don't know or what's right or wrong. You're just doing it.
Exactly.
If it comes out great, it's like awesome. And then everyone loves it. It's like perfect. I suppose.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Yeah. I was going to ask you, Paul, because now we're talking more about Tidy, and obviously, Steve, this is where you will definitely come in. The early days of Tidy 2 and some of the tracks you're producing back then for Tidy, like Travel's remix of Bulgaria. That was a big one here in Australia, Paul. That was huge.
It was a big one everywhere, and it was kind of a it was an interesting story behind that track, actually, because obviously the Signum mix was the big mix before. The original was kind of a bit more proggy and a bit more deep. Like the Signum mix was the one that was the kind of main mix when it first came out, which is an amazing record. And yeah, I was asked to remix it so this is once I'd started working at Tidy. I was sort of their in-house guy. So they had this series called the Recycle EPs, or Recycled EP, sorry. They were these little 10-inch vinyl, just 2 trackers with 2 different remixes of Tidy back catalogue stuff, one on each side. So I was asked to do something for that. And yeah, I chose Travel Bulgarian because I love the tune, basically. But I originally did kind of this sort of, I was trying to be a bit cool with it and did this kind of like techno-y percussive thing with it, which is actually on for the nerds out there. I did a compilation album called Insomnia 3, which was me and Tara Reynolds did a disc each. And my original mix of Bulgarian that I did is on there because we kind of got that on there before it got released. So yeah, that is out.
I haven't heard that, Paul. That's cool, man.
It's not as good as the one that everybody loves. But yeah, basically, I was trying to do something cool and creative with it. You're trying to sort of push boundaries a little bit. And then Ammo at Tidy, from the Tidy Boys, he's like, it's cool, but I think we just need to do a banger with it. So I basically then took the riff from the Signum mix and sort of made it all a bit tougher and a bit more hard housey, and that's the version that that blew up and everyone loved. It was probably a good lesson, actually. Like there are times to try and be clever, and there's times to just do the obvious can be good sometimes.
Absolutely. And so you were Tidy Trax in-house engineer, is that right? I don't know.
Yeah. So from about, again, someone will probably correct me on the dates, but from about 2000 to 2003 or 4, something like that. I was their in-house guy, which is when I first started working with Glasby, and they were formative years for me, really. It was kind of a bit of an unofficial apprenticeship, really. So I was their in-house producer, so did stuff for them. So I did the Jazz and Charlie, It's About Music, did a few bits for Glasby, worked on Lisa Lash's What Can You Do For Me, quite a few. There's loads around that era. It was a point where they had to manually stick the labels on the promo records. I was doing that. They needed CDs burning of stuff. I was doing that, so I was a bit of a studio runner, kind of. But when I wasn't doing all those bits, I was allowed to use their studio as much as I wanted, which is a really well-equipped, a dream studio for me at that point. So yeah, it was an amazing opportunity. I'll be eternally grateful to those guys for that opportunity, because those few years were the bit where I went from being, someone who did it as a hobby and had a bit of a spark for it, to actually being a pretty competent producer. Those 3 or 4 years with a really formative part of my career.
Blow wind up your ass, dude, but you become a bit of a household name, to be fair with you, especially here in Australia. Everyone knew of you as a producer, especially.
Oh, that's nice to hear.
Yeah. I mean, I lived in the UK as well, and Steve is from the UK originally. I'm half British myself, so I lived in London for a couple of years, and I was in the studio with some of the Edison Factor boys and Sentience. As well.
Nice, all talented blokes, definitely.
And legends as well, really cool guys.
Yeah.
And obviously their music was widely known here in Australia, but equally yours was too, man. It's
wicked, nice.
Yeah. Of course, in Glasby, when he played out here a lot, he played a lot of the tracks that he did with you too.
Yeah. Well, that's it. And even back then, I was doing a lot of stuff sort of behind the scenes for other people, which I've always enjoyed, So that's yeah, it's nice.
Like you're starting to make some traction with your productions. Like, how did you get hooked up with the Tidy guys? Like, how did that all come about?
Right, yeah. So that's yeah, basically what it boiled down to was, so I'd made this little demo of like maybe 8 tracks or something like that. Some of which were good, some of which probably weren't. And yeah, I was going out clubbing every weekend at this point, and I gave Andy and Amo, the Tidy Boys, a CD, a demo literally, with these few tracks on. And didn't hear anything for ages, and kind of assumed that, I mean, even that early on, you realise that you get a lot more, no replies than you do, than you do a positive or negative, probably. So yeah, I'd written it off. I wasn't particularly upset about it. I was just like, yeah, you try these things. And then I got back one Sunday night from my job at the butcher's, and had a voicemail from Amo from Tidy saying that they really liked the Entrance bootleg that I'd done, Entrance Set You Free. That was one of the ones on that demo. And that they wanted me to come in and sort of work in their studio a little bit and, polish it up, make it a bit better. So I was like, yeah, amazing, obviously. And sort of little did I know that was kind of a bit of an unofficial audition, really, as to whether I was worth getting in as that, on that kind of apprenticeship. I didn't know they were looking for somebody. They just got me down for a day to polish the track up. But obviously, I must have obviously looked keen enough and had a bit of potential that they took a chance on me. So I'm really grateful.
Oh, amazing. And then so you started working at Tidy, and then the rest.
So that was it, pretty much. They offered me that that role. It was kind of an apprenticeship, really. Like, so it was a little bit of money, but it was the opportunity more than anything else. So that was around about the time I was intending to go to uni. I hadn't quite got the grades I needed to do what I wanted at uni. So I just said, right, I'm going to do this for a year and see what happens. Like, give it a year. If nothing comes of it in a year, I'll, sack it off and it can go back to being a hobby. And by the end of that year, I was in.
So from the times that you were at Tidy, and obviously the tracks you're producing, and obviously the name that you started producing for yourself in the industry, how did that go about in terms of getting bookings as a DJ? Like, before you answer that, I know, because I've seen many of your podcasts and your thoughts, what you like to call yourself as a producer first before a DJ. And most artists are like that too, so I get it. But as I suppose, as an artist, were you getting bookings on the back end of what was happening with it, with the productions you're producing?
Yeah, pretty much. It kind of happened pretty naturally. So I mean, at the point where I started working at Tidy, I didn't even have turntables. I wasn't buying records. I was literally a producer first. I'd been making records for a long time before I even owned any. So yeah, that was the chronology. But I think pretty much at around about the same time, I got a pair of decks and started having a mess around. And quite a few of my friends had decks. I'd had some experience of DJing before that. Yeah. But yeah, bought a pair of 1210s through Tidy, actually, because they sold music equipment at that time through their parent company. So yeah, I bought a pair of 1210s and a mixer that was taken out of my paycheck every month. So sort of bought them on tick from the boss. And
that's a good deal, mate.
Exactly. So but yeah, it was great. And I did that, and learned to mix pretty quickly, got the put a bit of time into it. And then by which point I actually had a few releases coming out, and the name was starting to build a little bit. And Tidy ran an agency at that point as well, so it was kind of quite a natural fit, really. They took me on that agency, and I started getting a smattering of bookings round about then, to be honest. So it all happened pretty quickly, and lots of small stuff. Yeah. But also the Weekenders, like my first actual proper DJ set. I think second, actually, but it's a better story if I say it's the first. Was the first Tidy Weekender. They had this sort of
mate, that would have been 2006, wasn't it? Back then?
No, it was earlier than that. I think 3.
2003.
Yeah, maybe 4. It was earlier than 2006 anyway. Yeah, like I'd need to do a bit of Googling to find that, but I think it was around 2002 or 3, I think.
Yeah, right. Okay.
And Yeah, so I was originally supposed to be playing in the sort of new talent room. They had a sort of like, an up and comers room on the it's a room that's not there anymore, but like just a small room basically for new DJs. Um and then the opener for the main room on the Sunday cancelled at the last minute, and I got drafted in to do that. So yeah, my first proper gig was main room at the Tidy Weekender. So
right.
yeah, a bit of a baptism of fire, but equally, it went well. So it kind of.
How was the nerves for you, Paul? How are you feeling?
Do you know what? And absolutely. Well, in a way, it was better that I got it sprung on me like that, because it was the Sunday at the Tidy Weekenders. I hadn't had a huge amount of sleep, as you can probably imagine. And yeah, I just got a phone call saying, yeah, this DJ's cancelled. Can you be on it in an hour? So I didn't really have time to get too nervous about it. I had my records with me, obviously, because I thought I was on much later on in a different room.
Yeah, sweet.
So yeah, I got the call and just went and did it. And I was like, yeah, shaking like a leaf for the first couple of mixes. But once you've got the first couple under your belt, it's fine. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it, dude. It's a cool story, man. It's a cool story. Obviously, fast forward a little bit. We know your story at Tidy, and we know about that. But then going into Spektre and your I guess your other passion for techno. Yeah, I would love to hear more about that story, mate, and how that sort of formed with your production partner. What's his name?
Yeah, so Rich.
Rich, that's it, Rich.
Yeah. So yeah, really, we'd moved in the same circles for quite a long time. Actually, we knew quite a lot of the same people, but had never actually met one another, just by just chance, really. So Rich was at that point doing kind of electro house stuff as Filthy Rich, was his alias for that kind of stuff. So it was kind of in that like mid 2000s, or sort of mid 2000s, the big electro house, first wave tool room kind of
2008 sort of, yeah,
all that kind of era. Yeah, it's probably like four or five ish, I would say. This we're talking, maybe five, and he'd kind of got a bit bored of that, really. He'd been doing that thing. He was pretty busy gigging with it, and yeah, he just wanted to do some more different stuff, really. And he had really really good knowledge of that music, the sort of techno and the minimal thing that was starting to come through at that time, which I hadn't really been exposed to. I'd kind of been in my sort of like hard house and trance bubble, and not really, obviously I knew of the music, but it wasn't really, I didn't really dig into it. I didn't have a deep knowledge of many of the genres. And yeah, a mutual friend of ours, a guy called Charlie, basically I'd had a conversation with him saying I was getting a bit bored of doing what I was doing. Richard had a conversation saying basically the same thing, and he's like, right, you guys need to get in the studio together.
That's cool.
So yeah, the first time I met Rich was in the studio at my old house in Sheffield. And yeah, we just hit it off straight away. He was playing me playing me all this cool new stuff, all this sort of, German and European minimal stuff that I'd never heard before. And I was like, fuck, it probably blew my mind how, cool and fresh it sounded. Because I'd got a bit bored with the hard house thing at the time. It was very much like followed a formula, and it worked. The formula worked. But whenever you tried to do anything as a producer that was kind of a bit outside of that, nobody really like latched onto it, like it was, so I was just finding that a bit frustrating, really, a bit limiting. Much as I loved that sound, I kind of just had a bit of a hunger to do some sort of broader stuff.
Yeah. I fully get that.
Rich,
I fully get that.
So Rich played me. Yeah, it was stuff like Oliver Hunterman and Stefan Bodzin and all those kind of that era, sort of the back in the really minimal days, and I just started messing around with it, and that it was just great, because he's like, oh, can you make something like that? And I was like, yeah, I can make something like that, and it was just this cool, just really,
isn't it
a good test of skills.
That's rad, man. I find when you're in the studio with someone, the ideas just really come to life, especially if you're vibing on a sound that you both, you're willing to experiment, I guess. And if you got someone in the studio that is on the same page, I think magic just happens, doesn't it? It's like just cool things really just start to form, because two ideas or two brains are sometimes better than one, if that makes sense.
Oh, definitely. I far prefer working with other people in the studio than I do by myself. Obviously I've written music by myself, but I enjoy working with other people much more. Like, for me, the best recipe for a good studio session is if you've got similar taste but different knowledge. That's the key thing, so you can play each other stuff that the other hasn't heard before, and get people excited about something new, but also your general like guiding taste is similar. They're the best sessions for me. And me and Rich had a really good relationship in that sense.
Oh, I mean, 100%, dude. Like, I've got for me and Steve as well, we both love heaps of different styles of music. It's not just, I mean, don't get me wrong, I absolutely love anything that's hard house or trance or progressive or anything like that. But at the same time, I've also got more of a traditional background with, like you said in earlier, Paul, 80s. I've got a strong influence, growing up in the 80s, listening to bands like Icehouse or Depeche Mode or anything like that.
Yeah,
And
amazing.
I still even like, when I'm in the studio writing a track, I'll always put something on like that to gather influence on how they're producing certain sounds or what they're doing at certain parts of the track in terms of the way that they've laid it and sequenced it. And I find, by having that, well, personally for me, having that out of the box sort of thinking can really bring something new to what you're actually producing. You know what I mean?
Oh, 100%. Like, I think if you're whatever genre it is you're producing, like if all you reference is other things in that genre, it just becomes this sort of like, stale self-referencing thing where it all starts sounding the same. It's when you take a little sprinkling of something from somewhere else and put that in, that's what makes it exciting for me. Yeah, definitely. And you listen to the great tracks that you think of as genre records, like think about in hard house, like something like BK's Cortina, Music Is Moving. It's like it's a hard house rework of an old Italo thing, so it's taking a bit of one idea and putting it with something else, and that's where the magic happens.
I agree. And you can unfortunately it's easy to get stuck in the mold, isn't it, of the formula, like you're talking about before, as a producer, especially. I don't want to use hard house as a term there, but when you're writing hard house, that 4/4 formula, like you said, you can get stuck in the box a little bit if you're producing, you want to bring something else to it, and some people mightn't appreciate it. So it's like, well, hang on a sec. As a creative type of individual, it's hard to bring in different ideas into a genre that is a little bit closed in. That's not to say it's not rad, though. It's just sometimes it can be a bit limiting, as you say.
Definitely. And I think with that, it's kind of, you have to have a bit of a conversation with yourself there and be like, what is the reason that I'm making this music?
Yeah.
And be like, am I just making it, because if you're primarily a DJ and you want to just make stuff that works on the dance floor, keeps the people who you're performing to happy, then, maybe sticking to the formula is the right thing there. Whereas if you're kind of primarily writing the music because you want to write it and other people liking it's a bonus, then maybe you just have to sometimes go like, well, fuck them, I'm going to write it anyway. And if some of it sticks, great. And if it doesn't, I'll deal with it,
Yeah, Paul. And like you were saying earlier about how it was very hard to change the sound in that scene, I think that was kind of what stopped the growth of the hard house scene. Well, I think in Australia anyway, because it was like so many years of everything sounding the same, no one taking a risk with the sound. It just how long can that go before people get bored of it?
Yeah, definitely. The thing is, it happens in every genre that gets popular. It's not a problem specific to hard house. Literally, it's happened with pretty much every genre that's had like a degree of sort of crossover mainstream popularity.
Yeah.
Because everyone jumps on it, like the sound becomes popular, then people stick to that sound because it's popular, and then it gets played out, and then everyone gets bored, and then everyone moves on to something else.
That's
It's kind of like. But the problem is, it's very hard to steer once a scene or a sound or a genre has got stale. It's very hard to then steer it back because people have a tendency then to just jump to something else. They don't want to stay with the one that's gone stale and wait for it to freshen up again. They just jump to the complete opposite. They'll be like Minimal blew up that's a perfect example in the sort of mid 2000s in the UK. Everything had got really hard and fast and really, just noisy and aggressive and nasty in the hard house scene. That turned a load of people off, and then suddenly people flipped over and started going out to like 120 BPM bloopy minimal, because it's like it's a backlash. But you couldn't have suddenly turned hard house into that. You have to just deal with the cycles and just accept that it happens.
True. That's a good point.
100%.
That's what I was going to say before as well, in terms of like we had a conversation with Paul Glasby a few weeks ago, and it brought about the topic of, as a DJ or an artist, you really can either go out and DJ for the music that you really, really love as an artist, or you end up falling into the mold of playing for the crowd or producing for the crowd because it gives you that sort of commercialized success that you might be looking for. So I suppose, we had a good conversation about that. So I want to probably put it back on you, Paul. What's your take on that in terms of personally for you? What do you feel?
So there are definitely people who are more of an authority to speak on this than me, because as I say, I'm a producer first rather than a DJ. But it's I think when people just play really safe for the crowd from a DJ point of view, it's actually a bit of a cop out in my opinion, because I've seen really good DJs play to quite mainstream crowds and play cool records. Like, you know, I think if you're good at doing it, which I maybe put myself half in that category, but there's certainly people a lot better than me. Like, if you watch someone who's a real master of their craft, they can play cool records to mainstream crowds, and the way they structure it makes it work. So I think when someone goes on and just anthem bashes for an hour, it's just a bit of a cop out, really. You know, it's route one. You know, it's hoof it up the pitch. It's not the you know, it's not clever.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's exactly that was our thoughts as well. I love it. One of my most memorable experiences, and it's going to sound a bit left field here, but I spent a lot of time in Bali. So does Steve. We love going to Bali because we're in Australia.
Nice.
Have you been there, Paul, yourself?
I haven't. No, I haven't. Unfortunately, I've been to Australia and New Zealand a handful of times, but never had the opportunity to do Bali on the way there or the way back. But yeah, it looks like a beautiful place. I've had friends who've been.
Next time you come to Australia, dude, you must do it. It's really cool.
Wicked.
Anyway. There about a little short story about maybe 4 or 5 years ago. Me and my brother Johnny, who's also a producer, he produces some sick music. Anyway, nice. We went to this. We didn't even know it was there. We stumbled into like a background, like an alley. We didn't even know it was here, by the way. And we're having a shot. We're having a couple of shots between us. Had a pretty big session, and then all of a sudden we heard this literally through the door. This big thumping. Doosh, doosh, doosh. And we're like, what the hell is that? I'm like, where's this coming from? Because we were looking for something to go out with, right? And we'd heard this techno playing. And we're like, is this coming from in there? Because we're at the front of a bar, right? And we were like, what is this place? And we had no idea. And I said to the bar, I said, oi, what's at the back there? And he goes, oh, it's a VIP thing. Do you want to go have a look? And I'm like, yeah. So he let us in. And literally as the door opened, man, it was so loud. And I went in there and the music was just unreal. We stayed there until like 6 a.m. We got in a lot of trouble by our partners at the time. But what my point there is you stumble across some places where you mightn't think you're going to have a rad night, and all of a sudden you just got the mind-blowing night, and the DJs that you're hearing are playing the most underground stuff, like the stuff that you would not hear anywhere. It's just so underground, but yet it's so sick. So yeah, for me, that's what I love is when you're going out as a punter and you're hearing music that you don't even know what the tracks are as such. It's just like, this is just epic music. So then it puts you on the cycle of wanting to find what that music is. And that's what it did for me as well.
And I guess that kind of ties into it being really, from the DJ's point of view, you kind of want an open-minded crowd is almost better than a crowd that knows what they're there for.
Yeah.
You know, because obviously you were just like, fuck it, we just want a night out. You know, like, this sounds good, we'll go with it. You know, whereas I think sometimes with big lineups and things, you know, if people have paid £100 or whatever for a ticket, there's such an expectation and such a pressure that then they've, you know, the DJs are kind of under a bit of like, under the, you know, some almost feel like an obligation to sort of deliver what they're supposed to deliver, you know, so they'll actually get less freedom with those bigger events, I think. Whereas if it's a little underground night and people are just like, they're there for a good time and that's it, you've got less, you know, less expectation, which means you've got more freedom.
They end up playing all their own records and stuff because they feel like they've got people are there to see them play.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, there's probably isn't one answer to it, you know, like, but equally, you know, there's probably people still ask me to play Bulgarian, and you know, I'm a hard ass DJ playing like Tidy Weekenders. Like, I can only imagine what it's like if you're Calvin Harris or like David Guetta or something, and you've got to play your big single with Rihanna for the millionth time or whatever. You know, they're probably sick of it, but like they're almost like pop stars at that point. Like it's like, you know, if you went to see I'm trying to think of a good example. You know, you went to see Coldplay and they didn't do Yellow or whatever. You know, they've got to do it. You know,
Paul, I might edit this out because I might look like a complete here. But did you ever come to Brisbane and DJ?
Yeah, I did. It's quite a while ago now, so don't ask me what club it was because I don't remember at this point. But
was it
a friend. Do you know, it might have been twice actually. I think I might have done it once as Paul Maddox many moons ago. And yeah, we did it once as Spektre. I think it was just me on my own because with long distance tours we sometimes did just one of us. Because a friend of mine, Chris O'Rourke, lives in Brisbane. I remember catching up with him.
Chris O'Rourke, mate, he's a good friend of mine, dude.
You know Chris? Oh right, so yeah. So Progress, one of the clubs I first went to in Derby. Chris used to DJ there sometimes. That's how I know Chris. Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool, man.
Yeah,
What were
well,
you gonna say?
during the
What were you gonna say?
week we were because I like doing the research for this podcast. I was like, I didn't know you had anything to do with Spektre, and then because I had this is it's funny you're talking about how the music went minimal and all that. Like that's kind of where I ended up going DJing wise, but I just wasn't. It was too minimal, too slow for me. But I ended up buying a lot of your music. I had no idea you were involved in it, and then I actually went. I was telling Jared about this during the week. I went to a place called Bar Soma in Brisbane, and it was packed, and it was obviously you playing, but it was Spektre playing. But yeah, what a spin out.
Yeah, that'll have been it. I think it probably was. I think that Australia and New Zealand tour was. I think it was Spektre, obviously, but I think it was just me who went because we did that sometimes. You know, if it was a long haul thing, just one of us would go.
Yeah.
And do it. So yeah, I think you're probably right. You've got a better memory than me for what the name of the place was, though.
Oh, that was like a bit of a legendary underground music.
Wicked, yeah, I remember it being a good tour. So yeah, yeah, good. I'm glad it left an impression.
Oh, wicked, awesome.
And that's really cool, man. I'm stoked to hear, Chris. I haven't spoken to Chris in quite a while, but
I haven't for a little bit actually. No, but like it just reminded me that I remember. I remember that trip and remember catching up with him while I was over there. Yeah,
such a nice dude, he's a good producer as well. He's such a ledge.
Yeah, he's good. I'll after this, I'm going to drop him a message and catch up with him.
Yeah,
actually.
I am too.
So, Paul, talking about your you constantly work in the studio as an engineer. You're working with lots of different people. Obviously, you worked heaps with people like Paul Glasby and that. Can you tell us sort of how your career has progressed from the hard house scene to now you're doing all sorts of different genres? Like, tell us a bit about that, how that happened.
So yeah, it's kind of been, well, I mean, the Spektre, the sort of inception of Spektre was a bit of a turning point for, that was where I really first started doing any genres outside of the harder, hard house and trance stuff. And then for probably a good, like, we got quite a lot of momentum quite early with Spektre. So probably from about 10 or 15 years from then, that was kind of our main thing. So I did little bits of co-production and engineering on the side, but Spektre was my job really for a good period of time. And then in the last probably 3 years, I'd say, it kind of just naturally tapered off a little bit. Like the way that techno scene was heading wasn't really something that me and Rich loved. So we were kind of on that, had exactly the dilemma that we were just talking about a few minutes ago. Do you carry on making the stuff that fits in with that, or do you just do your own thing or whatever? So yeah, it just sort of naturally slowed down a little bit. We weren't getting booked as much. We weren't producing as much music. It just sort of naturally started to taper off a bit, really. So at that point, I already did some co-production things. So like a couple of guys in the house scene, obviously hard house people. But at that point where we weren't really touring anymore, because prior to that, for about 10 years, we'd been on the road pretty much every weekend, mainly Europe, but all over the world doing shows with Spektre. So when that slowed down, there was a bit of me that thought, right, what do we do to kind of kickstart this again? But then there was also a bit of me that was like, I don't really miss the travel, like after a decade or more of it. I'm super glad that I got the opportunity to do it. I'm not ungrateful at all about that. But after doing it for 15 years, getting a bit older, it certainly had more of a zest for late nights and early flights when I was 20 than I have when I'm 40. So I kind of realized that I didn't massively miss it. Whilst it was a great period of my life and something that I really enjoyed, I wasn't that upset that it had slowed down. So it just made me have a bit of a rethink. And I just kind of started treating the studio side of it, which had always been there, just as a bit more of a business, really, actively going out and looking for new people to work with rather than just, taking what landed. And just putting a bit more focus and a bit more energy and a bit more thought really into that side of it. And it's paid off. I've been, I'm working with some really, really interesting people now, really, creative and talented people, which, makes my job as the engineer much more, well, A, easier because you've got really great stuff to work with, and B, much more fun because, obviously it's working with interest, when the music's interesting, it doesn't feel like work. So yeah, it was kind of a bit of a a pivot that was brought about by circumstance, I guess. But it's turned out all right. So yeah.
Cool.
That's rad, man. A question for you, Paul. If you don't mind sharing, of course, who are you currently working with? If you're just for, I'm not big on dropping names or anything like that, but just you talk about creative people. Do you want to share with us a bit about that, who they are?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, there's quite a few, but like I'd say the people who I'm working with regularly at the moment, sort of doing fairly regular sessions with. There's Darius Syrossian, who I've been working with for ages. He was one, I've been working for a long time with him. So I've got a great relationship with Darius, like really, really talented guy. Just comes in with like really interesting ideas every time, really, the tracks are really pretty much formed and they just need a bit of tidying up basically. The ideas are really, really good, they just need the mix and stuff, really giving fun. That extra bit of polish. So yeah, love working with Darius. That's a great relationship. I've
been buying all of his Moxie edits.
Yeah, wicked. Yeah. That
on vinyl. I've been getting them on vinyl.
Yeah, it's great that he's doing that as well. Keeping keeping vinyl going, because it's it's a super important thing. It's history, really. I think it's become more of a collector's thing now. Collecting vinyl. I don't think it's many people's primary medium for DJing off anymore. Only a few, but it's great to have.
Sure.
So yeah, Darius is probably my longest. Other than Glasby, Darius is probably my sort of longest. Tenure client, I guess. Wow. And then who else I work with regularly? There's a Scottish DJ called Meg McHugh, who I've been working with for the last 2 years or so. So she does it's the sort of newer wave of hard stuff. So it's all pretty high tempos, 150 BPM ish.
Oh, wow.
But she does her own vocals on it, and it's kind of a new sound. Obviously it certainly takes things from old hard house, but also takes things from bits from psytrance and bits of slightly poppy sensibilities with some of the arrangements. They're much shorter tracks. So she's super cool to work with and super exciting. Comes with she's like an ideas cannon. She'll come and, fire like 1,000 ideas at you. And it's, just always an exciting session. And just recently I've started working with Juliet Fox as well, who's, again, we worked together on a Spektre record years ago. We did a collab with her called Thinking About You. So I've known Juliet for a good few years, but we've only started working together on her music in the last year or so. So yeah, that's going really well. Got a lot of projects on the go with that. And the other regular one is Brian Carney, who's like super established and super talented trance DJ. So yeah, I've just been adding a little bit of extra production and stuff to his things for the last couple of years, I think. So they're the ones who I'll probably work with. I'll have a session or two with them every month. But then there's lots of other people that I work with on a less regular basis as well.
Fantastic,
so cool, mate. So cool.
It really is. A bit more of a techie question for you now, Paul. Being that this is the stuff that I froth on. So what are you using in terms of your production kit at the moment? What are you using for?
So primarily it's Ableton Live is where I'm based in, DAW wise. And I'm mainly software, to be honest. I've got a few bits of hardware, like I've got a Moog Matriarch, which is fun. But to be honest, all the hardware stuff, I'll have a little tinker with it every now and then and, get a few little noises off it and stuff. But when I'm actually in a session, it's so much quicker to do everything in software that I do like 90% of the time.
Really?
So really in the room that I'm in now, most of the stuff is about getting good results out of the software, really. So good monitoring, like good acoustics, and then a few other little bits and bobs. Like I've got a couple of nice preamps and things for when I'm recording vocals, and a few decent mics and things like we've got here. But yeah, that's about it really. It's a pretty minimal setup, and the bits of hardware that I have got, they're toys really. Like if somebody robbed the studio and took all the synths, I'd be a bit annoyed, but it wouldn't stop me from making music.
Yeah. And in terms of your soft kit, what do you use mainly in terms of your soft synths?
So Diva is my absolute like go-to. That's the one that I couldn't live without. Yeah, I use Diva for lots and lots of stuff. Yeah, that's the one I couldn't go. Diva and Operator, which is one of the Ableton built-in since it'd probably be my desert island duo if I had to pick two. But then, yeah, I use lots of other bits as well. Like the other UHE stuff's great. I use Repro and Hive quite a bit. And things like Omnisphere, like, you know, contact libraries and things like that. For certain jobs, you know, I mean, obviously Diva's great for all the analog sounding stuff. But, you know, if you want realistic sounding strings, you're not going to use Diva for it, you know. So it's... But yeah, I mean, and I'll, you know, every time there's an offer on, I buy loads of plugins that I never even used, to be honest. Like,
They're just sitting there.
Impulse buys, yeah, exactly. Like Black Friday, got loads of stuff. But sometimes it can be nice. Like, I feel like it's important to learn a few tools well, rather than just dabbling with lots of stuff, which I learned early on, you know, same with the Nova. So I've always stuck by that having a few core tools and knowing them inside out is very important. You know, rather than just going through the presets on 50 cents, learn one really well. But then equally, the converse is kind of true as well, that if you're a bit stuck for inspiration, sometimes just loading something you've never used before up and flicking through the presets can spark an idea as well. So, you know, there's no, there's no right and wrong, as with all these, anything creative. Like if you get good ideas out of it, it's good.
For sure. So just one last techie question. Anyone that is listening, man, as a producer, like what would you say is the best way to, I guess, get a track started? A lot of producers that I talk to and people that come to me and ask for tips and things like that, I say, oh, how do I produce? Like I've got a lot of friends that are asking me about certain techniques that I use in the studio. And I do know there's no right or wrong. So what's your thoughts on how would you typically show up and explain what to do with someone who's never produced before?
So for me, the most important thing, I mean, obviously the actual technical side of it, there's so much on YouTube and things these days. You can pretty much learn, you know, like put YouTube searching for what you're struggling with and probably someone will have a solution. But in terms of back to your original question of how to start a track, for me, it always starts before you're even in the studio. Like have an idea first. And I think that is really important because a lot of people, and I've done this in the past as well, you know, I'm certainly not immune to this trap. Is that you sit down and go, right, I'm going to write a tune now. And there's a blank screen in front of you and you kind of start with some drums and you just invariably end up with something like a bit mediocre and a bit boring. Whereas if you've had an idea first and then you try and realize that idea, that works way better. You know, you think, oh, maybe I could make something, even if it's quite a vague idea, it could be quite nebulous. You know, it can be like, you know, I kind of want to make something banging, but with like a trancy vocal, or I kind of want to make something that, you know, crosses this idea with that idea, or it can be more formed, you know, like you have a melody in your head and you want to start with that, but like starting with an idea rather than just like clicking around on the computer is definitely, I would say that's my main tip for that one.
That's really cool. So the understanding, you know, what to do before you get in the studio. I personally found that as well. I sometimes actually enjoy the idea of, you know, if, for example, you listen to a track that you haven't heard before in a long time, it's been, you know, a track that you really love, whether on any genre, and drawing upon and sitting there and studying that track from end to end, just listening to all the elements, the kick, the bass, the percussion, the main elements of the track, the sequencing, the layout, what they've done. And I find for me, I get a lot of ideas when I really dissect a track and I just sit there and I think that sounds so fucking sick.
100%. Like I think that's really useful in two different ways as well, because it can be really good from a technical point of view. Like, you know, what elements have they got to make this track sound full and make it sound powerful? But it can also be really good from a writing point of view of like, why is it good? You know, like what is it about that track or that combination of elements that makes it exciting, you know, that makes it memorable? So, you know, you can analyze it on both a technical way and a, you know, kind of more ideas-y creative way as well. And like they're both really, really useful things to do.
For sure, man. And one thing Steve and I were talking about literally just yesterday, because we had a chat yesterday and talking about, reminiscing about some of the tracks that were being produced. They've been the top, like the days of Tony DeVitt with Simon Parks, you know, doing the engineering for Tony DeVitt. And being a producer back then is very, very different to being a producer these days in terms of what we have at our fingertips. You know, technology back then was very, very different. And yet the difference, and what Steve, you can back me up on this, Steve, but one thing is, back then you might have like an 8 or 12 track, and you've got 12 channels to work off when you're basically somewhat limited to what you're able to use with those channels or those instruments. These days, you can plug in Ableton Live or Logic or Cubase or whatever, and you've got a never-ending supply of instruments. The issue that I see with that is you just start layering and layering and layering and layering, and I think they can easily fall into that trap of just producing just a bunch of stuff as opposed to really keeping it, streamlined and using each instrument to be its most effective use. Does that make
100%.
sense?
Yeah, like, and I read an interview with Phil Hartnell from Orbital a little while ago, and he was basically saying a similar thing, that they made all that early Orbital stuff on. I think they had like an S950 sampler, like one synth, and like a little 8-track or 4-track mixer, even. Like,
Amazing.
But it made them write more interesting parts because they only had a couple of sounds.
Yeah.
So they were like, right, what can we do with this? So limitation can like force creativity a lot. But obviously it's hard because you have to kind of impose artificial rules on yourself now rather than having real limitations, because, like you say, you can have a million tracks and, put 20 layers on everything.
Yeah.
But again, goes back to what you were saying about analyzing stuff. Analyze some stuff from the early 90s and the mid 90s that works really, really well. Did they put 15 different layers of serum on their lead? No, it was one sample played up and down the keyboard, and that's like,
crazy. And even the
percussion,
man, like just going back into more hard house roots, you listen to the percussion of a track in say the late 90s or early 2000s before, DAWs were a big thing. And you can hear that the percussion is so minimal, it's just, you might have one loop that's been sitting there, but that loop is used effectively. Nowadays, I find, and this is maybe a weakness or not, I'm not sure, depends which way you look at it, but a lot of producers just layer percussion, and I sometimes think that it's there to fill a gap so it sounds full. And I just think for me, I love when I hear each element or instrument sound what it needs to be, so.
And I think it should always be like, what's the reason? Like, so I do quite a few sort of mix downs and stuff for other people where they send me their Ableton projects over as well. And one thing that you find with sort of less experienced producers a lot is that they'll be like sticking a compressor on every channel or sticking an EQ on every channel. And the advice I always give is like, don't put anything anywhere without a reason. So if you want if you want to limit the range of something, or you want to make it more snappy or whatever, cool, use a compressor. Or you want it to be more bright, EQ it, obviously. But don't do things just cause. Like always, if you're adding a sound, why are you adding that sound? Or if you're changing it, why are you changing it? And just being mindful of like what the rationale behind doing things is, and it'll you'll make better decisions because of it. And equally, it's being able to like be brutal with like criticality of your own work. So if you've spent 3 hours on something, you don't really want to delete it, but sometimes you've got to go, do you know what, I spent 3 hours on it and it's shit and I just need to delete it and move on. And that's more, it's better to delete it at that point than spend another 3 hours on it and it's still be shit.
Or you go away and the next morning you wake up and like, all right, let's put this on and have a good listen, and all of a sudden you put it on and you're like, what the hell is that?
Yeah. It happens to everybody, I've been doing this like every day for 20 years now. It still happens to me, like that's not something that you ever get out of, unfortunately. Or I haven't done yet anyway, maybe in another 20.
I think there is this misconception from a lot of people that when they hear a produced track, they think, oh yeah, when you write a track, it must be, you just get in the studio and you come out with something that's like magical. It's like, no.
The thing is, like, so what I would say with that is it's not really about how long you spend on a particular track. It's just keeping the good bits. You know, like some things that I've worked on with people, we've literally done in a few hours and they've been really, really good, but we'll have done 10 things that took a couple of hours each and one of them will have been really, really good. That's the trick. It's not necessarily that you have to spend a long time on each individual thing, but you have to kind of work through a lot of ideas to find those nuggets of gold.
So good, man.
Can you tell us a little bit about the Olive Grooves alias?
Yeah, so that was still within the hard house thing. I think they were all released on Tidy. There may have been a remix or two elsewhere, but it was an alias of mine that I started at a time that I can't remember when, quite a while ago now.
I didn't even
And it
know
came
this.
about because I was doing all the warm-up slots on a Tidy Boys tour called Tidy Boys Big Night Out. So they did, yeah, it was like 4 dates or 5 dates or something like that. And I was sort of, we did it like a proper tour, actually that sort of all traveled around together and did all the shows together. So I was doing the opening either 90 minutes or 2 hours, I think, at pretty much all the at all these shows. And as I was doing it, I was finding that for a lot of the gaps in the set where I wanted stuff, I didn't really have any records that filled the gap, or they were quite old. I was playing quite a lot of stuff that was, a little bit old at the time. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I was like, why is nobody making any new stuff like this anymore?
Yeah.
And it was kind of in that Untidy Dubs, early Tripoli tracks, kind of,
Yeah.
like less hard house, if you know what I mean. It was a bit more groove based.
Yeah.
But still my take on it. So yeah, sort of after, I think possibly midway through that tour actually, because it was over a month or two. I sort of jumped in. I was like, right, I need something to play there, and just made these few groovy little tracks, to fill the gap really. And it lent very heavily on the old Untidy sound, and like I say, early Tripoli tracks, and Sharp Boys and all that kind of stuff. So it wasn't reinventing the wheel by any stretch. But yeah, it was my take on that kind of thing, and did a couple of EPs with it. Did 2 EPs on Tidy, I think, and a few remixes. Did a couple of little bootleg things as well. Did a little bootleg of Crystal Waters' Gypsy Woman that came out as a white label around the same time.
So just looking, I'm just actually, as you're talking here, Paul, I'm just doing some research because to be fair with you, I didn't even know anything about Olive Groove's.
You'll probably tell me a load of releases that I've forgotten about, I should think.
I'm waiting for you to drop the penny to say, oh, it was this release or that release. But but I can see that you produced one. I Can't Let Go, if I'm correct.
Yeah, so that was on the first EP, I believe. That was on. Yeah, I did an Olive Groove's EP on for Tidy or Untidy, one or the other. Yeah, so I think it was three or four tracks. And Can't Let Go was the lead track off that EP. Yeah, when was that actually? If you've got Discogs open.
Yeah, I do actually. 2006.
Yeah, sound nice.
Yeah. I Can't Let Go, Pitch Bang Groove, Organ Grinder, On Fire.
That's the one. Yeah, 4 tracks. Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
And yeah, the story behind the name. Quickly, my old studio was in my house in Sheffield on a road called Olive Grove Road, so it was just a little pun on that.
No.
So whereabouts are you living now, dude?
Kind of not that far from where I was before, really, but I'm sort of in between sort of Leeds, Bradford, Halifax kind of way, so just a little bit further north, really, like an hour from Sheffield. So yeah, not very far away, really.
Yeah. More of an industry thing. What have you personally found in the UK musically? What's happening? Obviously, Australia is very different, Paul. I mean, you've been here, but in terms of music, the industry is very, very different over here. It used to be somewhat almost following the UK, and to some degree, the NZ is following the UK in terms of like the hard house scene and so on. But in Australia, it's definitely different. So what's your, I guess, update on where the UK is at in all the passions of music you love in different genres?
So, I mean, in terms of clubs, D&B is absolutely huge in the UK, though, which is it's music that I like, but it's never been my passion. Like I'm not a buff on that scene at all. But that's huge. There's that's sort of mainstream now. There's loads and loads of clubs playing drum and bass. But to be honest, I think similar to Australia and a lot of Europe now, certainly like Netherlands and a lot of Central Europe, that kind of new wave of hard stuff is massively back. You've got and it sounds a little bit more to me like it leans more heavily anyway on the sort of early 90s kind of more vocal led, sort of hard bag kind of sound, which I love. It was fun, it's quite camp, it's quite good fun, it's really uplifting. And yeah, there's a lot of that, not as much in the UK, but certainly in Europe, like you see there's festivals in Holland, and they just look a good vibe, man. Like you see videos of the people playing at these, like there's quite a few British DJs actually. There's like Kyle Starkey and Entasia and a lot of those kind of names. And there's an Aussie DJ, Bella Claxton, actually, who plays that kind of stuff as well, who's doing a lot of stuff in Holland.
Wow.
And
Cool, man.
it's it's huge, and they just like I've not really been to any of those events because I'm probably a generation older than the people who are attending them primarily. But they look a fucking vibe, man. Like everyone's going off. It's not everybody putting their phones like some of these
Yeah.
videos you see. In other scenes, like everyone looks like they're having a great time and going off.
Keeping
So
it real.
I'm here for it.
That's rad, man.
Yeah.
What's your take on that, Steve? I mean, you're definitely more of a punter than I am here in Australia. Like, what's your take on what's happening here in Australia, scene wise?
Well, like apart from say the heritage house scene over here is huge. Like all the old, like we often get Oakenfold, Tall Paul, Danny Rampling, all the old school legends coming through playing these they're like either 90s or 2000s focused, and they're huge. The events are massive,
And are the punters at those kind of people who are our age, or is
Yes.
it a younger crowd? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
We have the same
yeah.
thing over here.
Yeah,
There's loads of sort of classicsy kind of nights, which is gets all the old retired ravers like us out of retirement for a night or a day, ideally.
Yeah. That's what we're like as well. A day.
But sorry, carry on. I interrupted.
No, but apparently, I mean, I've only from what I've seen on Instagram, and I've talked to other guys, like the faster techno scene. There's like a few young promotion crews that are putting on these massive events. I don't know how they're doing it, but they're doing things like they're holding, like 5,000 people raves underneath bridges and stuff, and it's professionally set up, it's fenced off and secure. Incredible. Like, so there is a massive underground scene over here.
Totally. And it's great to see, I feel a little bit detached from that now because, I'm not to be those scenes like the hard house scene for us. Part of why that was so exciting was because we were 20 years old, and it was fresh and exciting, and it was our first time, doing these things,
Or raving and just having a good time.
Meeting these people for the first, exactly. Like, I don't think you can ever have that experience again as a 40-year-old person. Like you can go out and enjoy the music and have a great night, of course, but like that excitement and that passion and that like vibrance is kind of comes with it being new, I think. And it's it's great that that's still that's happening again for a fresh wave of people.
Another generation. Yeah,
totally. Yeah.
It makes us feel
and it's
like
always different. The music's different, but it always is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Paul, I got some rapid fire questions for you.
Okay, cool.
I often do this at the end of the podcast.
Sweet.
Some of them you've kind of covered, but I'll hit you with them anyway.
All good.
All right, hard house or techno?
Hard house. First love.
Solo or collaboration?
Collaboration every single time.
Yeah, bloody good. Yeah, it's good to see. Clubs or festivals?
Clubs. Yeah, like the thing is, I love going to festivals, but actually, from a DJ point of view, I often find big stages, you're kind of quite detached from the audience, and like it's cool to see, if there's thousands and thousands of people there, obviously that's an amazing thing. But actually, the interaction you get when you're in a like maybe 500-600 cap club, full dance floor, everyone's kind of at eye level, and you can actually see not just the mass reaction, but individual reactions. You drop a tune, you can see that guy over there loved it. Like I love that. That's my that's my preference there for sure.
Big dark sweaty room. Awesome.
Exactly.
Heaven. Hardware or software?
Software. Hardware is nice to have, but realistically, I could live without it. Whereas if you told me that I had to start making music without a computer now, I'd be devastated.
Way too hard. Remix or original?
That's a hard one. I do enjoy both, but I guess, and probably I've had more success with big remixes, and some of my biggest things have been remixes, but I would say the satisfaction of having made something entirely from scratch and people loving it is a little bit more than when you're kind of just reinterpreting what someone else has done. So original, but not by much.
Bloody good. Olive Grooves or Spektre?
Probably Spektre. Yeah, I mean definitely Spektre. Olive Grooves was a fun little a fun little project, but Spektre was like a really formative period of my life, and a really I achieved probably more. Rich and I achieved more with the Spektre thing than I ever did with the hard house thing, really. So yeah, that was definitely the one out of those two.
Cool, cool. One track DJs should revisit.
Oh, that's a
Tough,
good one.
tough one, eh?
Do you know what? There's a an Instagram account called I think it's just called Hard House Classics, and they kind of post just kind of less obvious Hard House Classics every day. And they posted a track called Trippy by Nick Sentience and Harry Diamond the other
I
day.
know this. Yeah.
Which has never left my box, but it's not one that it's not a classic per se. It's
Yeah,
not one
yeah.
that it's not one that you get on a
Unreal.
classics compilation, but it's just a great, great record. So let's go with that.
That's the one where it goes like digga 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 boom boom.
Yeah,
Exactly that one. Yeah. It's from
that thing
Quantum
is
Jump, the
so
sample. It's,
sick,
but
man.
it's a great tune.
Sick. One lesson from your 20 plus years.
Oh God, there's plenty, but let's keep it to a music one. I would say, as a producer, always sit on your tracks for a while before you play them to anyone. Because it's easy to get. When you've done something new, it's right to be excited about it. You should be. Like, if you're not excited about it, that's a problem. But like just leave it for a day or two, give it a listen back, and fix any glaring howlers first before you send it to anyone. And I still do it now. I'll finish something and be buzzing about it and send it to people straight away. I'll listen to it in the car and be like, oh, fuck, the vocal's too quiet, or whatever. So just give yourself a little bit of like cooling down time before you send stuff out, I would say, is a good tip.
Awesome. What's next?
Good question. I've never been a particularly good like forward planner, to be honest, and I guess kind of being reactive has sort of served me quite well. So I'm going to kind of carry on doing that. But yeah, I mean, carry on working with the people who I'm working with, carry on making good stuff, try and continually make better stuff. But then I have got a few Paul Maddox bits lined up actually. I was chatting to BK about doing a collab a little while ago, which we've been threatening to do for years. But we were chatting about that the other day, so hopefully that'll come to fruition at some point in the not too distant future. And I've just done a remix of Rob Tessera Stay, or Rob Tessera with Vinyl Groover and the Redhead Stay, for the latest Tidy Remixes pack. I think it's remixed with 3 X's because it's for the 30th birthday. So yeah, I've done that, and that's kind of slightly in the style that we were just discussing, that kind of newer wave hard house stuff that kind of references the more fun, handbaggy early 90s stuff. So that's I'm pleased with how that's come out.
Awesome. And mate, the last question, I often forget to ask this, but what's the BPM? What do you think the best BPM is?
I would say for me 140. It's like plenty of energy but still danceable, like anything much above that and it gets into like you just pumping your fist kind of territory. I like 140, you can still dance a bit. So yeah, that's a sweet spot for me.
Yeah.
Oh, unreal. Awesome, mate. Any other questions, Frantic?
No, I think that's good, man. We covered a lot. I mean, I've always been inspired by the stuff that you've done, dude.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm an avid fan and friend of Sentience. So when you said Trippy, I'm like, oh yeah, that's just a classic. And I've got so many stories about that track or Discotheque or his early stuff.
Honestly, those Nucleus Purples, like in my little local record shop where I used to live, I would go in and if there was a new Nucleus Purple, I would just go and buy it straight away. Didn't 100%. Even listen to it. You didn't need to. They were always amazing. Yeah,
always
like such a good
Purple Twilight and all these early stuff. Like
yeah, I think I've got all the. Did you remember 7 as well? That was one of the last big ones. But
great
7, record. I hammered that. Great tune.
Big track. And his stuff that he did with Harry Diamond was gold, man. And Harry Diamond, as a producer in his own right, is an epic producer.
Did some really, really good stuff. Spectrum on Purple was really good as well. That was Harry Diamond and someone else. I can't remember who. The Mexican? Yeah, I think.
That's yeah.
Great label.
My question, last question there would be in terms of some of your inspiration as a producer. Like you're talking about Sentience, and who has really inspired you personally as an artist or producer?
So on the hard house stuff, I mean, they were the two really. But Ben, BK, and Nick were the two whose records I listened to. I had all of them basically, and being able to make something close to as good as that was my goal really at that point in time.
Yeah.
And John Doe as well. Actually, I loved his stuff.
Doe's very good. Yeah.
Yeah. Again, I think all 3 of them had a unique sound, and that was something, I didn't want to copy their sound, but like created a unique sound of my own was something that I always really wanted to achieve, and all 3 of those, you know, you can hear a BK record or a Nick Sentience record or a John Doe record, like within the first 30 seconds of hearing it, you know who's made it, you know, and that's having that signature sound is really important. So those three, but then sort of dance music more broadly. Before I was even going out, BT, I listened to the first three BT albums just like endlessly when I was sort of in my teens, and just the production level compared to what everyone else was doing at that point in time, he was just like in a different world. Yeah.
Incredible producer. Is he actually still producing these days? I haven't.
Yeah, he's kind of gone back to doing electronic music again. He did lots of scores, you know, he did lots of movie stuff. But yeah, I think he's gone back to making, you know, like more, not so much dance floor stuff, but, you know, sort of listenable, you know, like just electronic music, really. But give him a follow because he started doing loads of little insights into, you know, how tracks were made and things like that. And he's got, you know, his studio is like almost like a living museum. You know, he's still got this computer from the 80s that he made his first records on and stuff. It's like
it's even got the projects on it and everything. Like
super talented, incredibly interesting guy. Like he's really into the sort of psychology of music and stuff as well. He's really interesting fella.
Yeah, always personally for me, I've always been inspired by the guys at Way Out West, especially Wisternoff. I really think he's such a talented producer, and
they did some amazing stuff. There was in fact it was one of the Global Undergrounds, the Nick Warren Budapest one was one of the other ones that I had. You know, when we were talking about those sort of formative when you got into dance music albums, that was another one around then. Both amazing producers.
Well, mate, thank you again, Paul. Yeah, it's been really good to have you.
You're more than welcome. No, it's been fun. As I said, I'll happily I'll chat about this stuff all day.
Yeah, I've got some not personal stuff, but production stuff we'll talk about.
Right, sorry, I'm leaving the chat.
We could keep going all night on this stuff, man. I swear.
Yeah. So good. Yeah. Fire away.
No. As in, I will talk after.
Oh, right, fine. All good. Cool.
Yeah. Anything. Yeah, go Steve.
Sorry. I was just going to say, man, thanks heaps, Paul, for
you're more than welcome. It's been a pleasure.
On. It's like just having the podcast. I've met so many amazing people and talked to so many big stars, and it's been such a great project to do, and I don't know that much about production. I've been in the studio with a few people, and we've made a few tracks and done a few things, but like just sitting and listening and learning from guys like you, and it's just nice to know that like someone who's had so much success like yourself, you still have the same kind of insecurities as like us, if that makes sense.
Anyone who says they don't is bullshitting. You know, like it's just, you know, like I think anyone if you're immune from self-doubt, you're probably not very good, because like if you know, if someone's got that degree of confidence that they can't analyze when they're doing things well or not, like that's dangerous. That level of ego is just like, you know, you've got no ground in that at all. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, bloody awesome. Oh, thanks, mate. We'll end it there.
All good. Pleasure.